Welcome to this webinar on streamlining ad break workflows. I'm Jeff Stedman, Chief Marketing Officer at SDVI, and I want to thank you for watching this webinar and joining us. I want to start with a scenario that anyone who's running an ad-supported content program will recognize. You've got a library of content that you need to monetize on FAST or AVOD or other ad-supported tiers. You know that every title needs clean, accurate ad break markers before it can go out. The problem is your team can't hand review every asset. A single 40-minute episode takes 20 to 60 minutes to segment by hand. Multiply that across thousands of titles with a team that's not growing, and you don't have a workflow problem, you have a math problem. What if you could compress that to minutes? Keep a human in the loop for the calls that matter, and do it all inside your existing media supply chain. That's exactly what we're going to show you today. I'm joined today by three experts who've put this solution together. And rather than introduce them myself, I'm going to pass the baton around so you can hear them talk about themselves directly. Let me start with Arash.
Hi everyone, I'm Arash Pandari, the founder and CEO of Vionlabs, huge movie nerd and huge tech nerd. Thank you for having me, Jeff.
You bet. Thanks, Arash. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm the Chief Product Officer at SDVI. I also like movies just like Arash, so we should watch one together. I'm happy to be here as well and talk about what we can bring to the table with the Rally platform.
Thanks you, Chris. And Neil?
Yeah, hi, I'm Neil Anderson. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Codemill. I've been working with both SDVI and Vionlabs for a number of years and delighted to show you our integrated solution for ad break workflows.
Excellent. What a team. Let's get into it. And let me start by setting the stage and talk a little bit about the problem. You know, ad break detection sounds simple, but it's actually one of the most labor-intensive steps in preparing content for distribution and monetization. Number one, it's slow, it's manual. As I mentioned earlier, it takes anywhere from 20 to 60 minutes per episode for manual segmentation. And the tooling is pretty fragmented. Operators bounce around between spreadsheets, different players, MAM systems, and really no continuity. There's no real single source of truth and really no way to do this at scale. And the business impact is real. You know, poorly placed ad breaks measurably increase churn. They reduce ad value. Breaks that land kind of mid-scene or mid-dialogue drive viewers to drop away and reduce the whole value of the content that you're trying to monetize. And that's a real problem. It's not something that's nice to fix. It's real money going out the door. Now, the business context puts a lot of urgency behind this solution because ad-supported tiers are the fastest growing segment of streaming. Libraries are growing several times faster than the teams that are supporting them, and viewer tolerance for bad ad breaks is basically zero. Frame accuracy is really the only acceptable bar. But the number that always stops people, 46% lower viewer churn when breaks are placed at story-aware natural pauses. That's not a marginal improvement. That's a structural difference in the quality of the ad experience. Now, what we're going to talk about is how our solution can make that problem go away, or at least minimize the impact of bad ad placements. Now, this is the core of the orchestrated, automated demo that we're going to show you in a minute. I put it here as 4 steps. Step 1 is really the Rally, SDVI Rally platform as the underlying orchestration platform. Content lands, Rally kicks off the workflow. We provision the resources, and we route the asset to Vionlabs operating as an application service, so no manual handoffs. The second step is Vionlabs runs its story-aware AI detection and returns candidate ad break markers in minutes, not hours. Story-aware AI that understands narrative structure, not just scene cuts, and I'm going to let Arash go deeper on how that works in a moment. The third step is then Rally routes the proxy and the candidate markers over to Codemill's Accurate Video Validate tool, where an operator reviews, adjusts, and approves the final markers. This puts a human in the loop where an operator's review and approval of markers can happen in a frame-accurate timeline. And then finally, the finalized markers come back into Rally, which then can drive the asset through packaging and ad stitching and the rest of the supply chain. Rally's the connective tissue from end to end, but the operator only touches the asset for high judgment work. Everything else is automated. And this is what really leads to a tremendous increase in efficiency and productivity for the ops teams. Now, why does this approach work? Well, a couple of things. Number one, we've got a best of breed approach using our application services market, which includes Codemill and Vionlabs, who are leaders in what their respective expertise is. We're able to draw in these best of breed applications into the workflow, automating where we can. And as the second box here says, putting a human in the loop where a human is best placed to make the right decisions and the right judgment. And this whole solution is cloud native and consumption based. And that's critical because let's say you have a library project where you might need to run thousands of hours through the workflow over a weekend. Rally can scale up the resources on demand and scale them back down when that project's done, and you only pay for what you use. So whether you've got a big library or you've got steady state, the economics work either way. At this point, let me hand it over to Arash to talk a little more about what Vionlabs is doing under the hood.
Thank you so much, Jeff. So first of all, let me kind of approach what you were talking about. I love the whole approach of having, AI being used for scaling, but I think it's important for everybody to understand that it should always be humanly perfected. We're talking about creative assets. We're talking about creative content. I think that's why it's so important to keep the humans in the loop and having them being able to do what they do best, but have the AI scaling that. And we've been working with this for many, many years, especially big focus on ad breaks. And we also learned through a big survey that we did that one of the main reasons for churn in ad services and AVOD services is not just having repetitive tasks, which means that people are not selling out their ad inventories. It's actually also a bad experience. So we try to approach this with a very different approach where we wanted to have a model that is specifically trained for entertainment content. So we haven't trained this model from public data or scrape the internet. It has been trained specifically for reality TV, for Korean dramas, for mainstream content here in the Westerns, everywhere from TV shows to movies, etc. And we have now analyzed over 1 million videos and deployed the service over 60 countries with a lot of the bigger brands out there. And the importance that we understood is that it's not just about delivering the API and the data. It's also having it connected to a workflow for each of these teams to help them solve any of these domain-specific problems. Problems that they repetitively have to have every week after week and try to, like you mentioned, we have a couple of clients like marking over, I think, 40 episodes of telenovelas with around 30 episodes per season. Sorry, 40 seasons with about around 30 episodes per season, which is like crazy amount of content for them to watch. So the human factor plays a role when you have to do that over and over again. You get tired as a human being, and that's why our tools work so well in collaboration with humans here. So if you look at the model itself, like I mentioned, what does it mean when it's story aware? What does it mean that we have trained it for entertainment specifically? Well, first of all, we have trained a specific model, a deep learning model that detects and have been trained basically what is a good ad break. So we have labeled hundreds of thousands, or if not even more, of ad breaks and told the model that this is a good position for an ad break. But we noticed that it needed a bit more information than that. Like our models also have everywhere from stress levels to emotional data on a scene level to understand basically what the narrative arc is, what the story arc is, to find moments that is not very high intense as example, so you don't put it in the middle of an action scene. Then we have a model also there that is working for scene boundary detection, that is looking for natural scene changes, where it's looking at everywhere from shot similarity to listening to the dialogue to make sure it's not in the middle of a dialogue scene. And what is good with this approach is that we have several models working together to kind of collaborate and say, okay, this is a good position. And if a few of those models don't agree, you get a different ranking on the ad break. So you still get a good score so you can understand the quality of the actual ad breaks itself as well. And this has been very important for a lot of our clients to be able to kind of determine if they want a fixed ad break every fifth minute for any assets above 20 minutes, maybe the ad break just jumps in at a position that is a rank 4 ad break where only one model agrees. If they have a rank 1 coming a few seconds afterwards, like 30 seconds, it's a better decision to choose the rank 1 because that is going to give a better user experience. So the ranking system have really helped our customers to kind of set their logistics of how to distribute the actual ad breaks throughout the actual asset itself. And like you mentioned yourself, I mean, obviously this affects by the end of the churn rate. Within a couple of A/B testing with some of our bigger AVOD customers that we have out there, one of the numbers that we don't have in the slide here that I think was really interesting to see is they did an A/B test comparing it to what we call random logic, which means that you put a fixed ad break every exactly 5th minute if the content is 20 minutes versus having ad breaks that are aware where the natural transitions are. They didn't just improve their retentions with their users or minutes watched. They actually had a higher revenue in a single digit though, but this customer specifically had millions of users. So that single percentage that they improved their revenue with was significant change for them. And that was just making sure that the users got a better experience with it. So having an approach where you can understand all of these points are extremely important. And then in the bottom of that, we have also some core algorithms looking at very basic things like looking for black frames, because a lot of content have been also designed with ad breaks already added in the production line. So if you look at sitcoms like Big Bang Theory, you have either bumpers or you have also the black frames. So we made sure that the model can also pick up on those. And working together with Codemill with this, I think we found more or less the perfect workflow, how to get the recommendations of where to insert the ads to the media operations team, and then them being able to kind of validate that super quickly.
Excellent, excellent. Just that whole notion of automatically creating candidates and then pushing those candidates over to a human operator to make them more productive is really an excellent story, and I'd like to see it. So, Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us through or start off on the demo, you and Neil.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll be starting off in the Rally application and showing you a little bit about the supply chain working in Rally itself. As this is obviously largely an automation task, the demo here is not very interactive, but it will become very interactive towards the end of it when Neil takes over and shows you actually looking at the markers. We're in the Rally application, and again, this is where you have configured the system to be able to run the ad break detection based on your business rules, and you can have different presets, different information you want to send to the tool. You can do the different steps within the supply chain wherever you see fit. And then once you have that set up, I always nonchalantly say, throw clips at it. And then the system will scale accordingly. And if you have 100 clips running through, 100 clips will run as fast as 1,000 clips or even more. So you can then just scroll through the system and see all the clips that are running in your system and have run in the system with status information and so on. But if we actually look at a single supply chain as an example that has been running for this asset, including ad break detection, you can see a little supply chain visualization here where you do a couple of different things, including you create a proxy, you perhaps do some QC, and then also you want to deliver the material and you need to create some ad breaks to be able to then monetize the content more efficiently later on. So if I take this supply chain visualization with all these different steps that happen in parallel and so on, and zoom into this little linear flow over here, you can see this branches off because it says like, I want to do an ad break detection and I want to look into this and validate, and I want to look into validate with a proxy. So the first thing I'm going to start is the proxy. And then I'm going to start some AI tool chains off, because apart from ad break detection, I might do additional things as well with tools. But jumping into this straight chain over here, you can see here, this job is the Vionlabs ad break detection job. It just runs as part of the automation. I can see exactly when it ran, how long it ran for, how much it cost. And all of that information is preserved at me, not just at the asset level, but across all the assets in total. And in that case, I can then also make a good case to my finance department later on saying like, look how much money I'm spending on the ad break detection, but at the same time, look how much ad revenue that brings in. Doesn't that make it worthwhile? Should we do this for more assets to monetize them better? You get a lot of insights into your operations, and with that can make a lot of smarter decisions downstream. So in this case, the outbreak detection was run, and then the system again fully automatically then comes up and says like, okay, I need to create a manual task for someone to actually look at the outbreaks and verify them. And if they're right, and again, both Arash and Jeff talked about human in the loop, Rally facilitates this. And how does it facilitate this? It facilitates it with something that we call a work order. You can see a work order over here. That job is blue because it's still active. Neil has not started actively finishing it yet, otherwise it would be green. So in this case, you can see there's a work order that was started by the system for a user to work on. In this case, you can already see in the bottoms there that Neil has already taken that work order and he's working on it. Otherwise, it would be perhaps still queued or something. And that's the core of this. So a user doesn't need to go hunting for the next item to look at breaks for. It can go into the system, and if I click on this accurate work order over here, it can go into the system and see the task that it needs to work on. You can see I have one task in here already assigned to myself. It's already active because it's blue, so I can start working on it. But if I don't have any other tasks, I can go into an unassigned task and see all the other tasks that are in the system ready for me to start working on. So I can just go to the first one because they're in priority order and say take and activate and start working on them. Again, I don't need to hunting and no need to figure out which one is the next important task. It's here right at me, right for me in this list. It is ready for me to work on. It has all the information I need in there. Again, I don't need to go through 3 different tools to get the report out of the Vionlabs. It's all in here. And with me taking and activating it, it is already then assigned to me. Later on, my organization knows that I worked on it and knows how many of them I worked on, how long I worked on them. And again, putting that into consideration in that whole end-to-end ad break detection workflow. And to make that super easy, I just select my task here, and you can see the right-hand side here, it now says Accurate Video Validate. I can press this button, and now it will open the Accurate Video Validate in a new window, ready for me to work on. But I can show you what it does, but for sure Neil can show you in much more eloquent way what and how you do your outbreak markers and nudge them around and figure out where they need to be. So with no further ado, over to Neil.
Thanks very much, Chris. So as Chris was saying, now that we've triggered all of our various automations and the task is now ready to review, I'm going to open this up in Accurate Video Validate. So Accurate Video Validate, if you're not aware, is our web native application that's designed for really reviewing all kinds of content and especially for time-based metadata workflows. So for example, a lot of customers have been using Validate for a long time to review their auto QC reports. So taking those XML or JSON markers and being able to search and filter within the Accurate Video Validate interface and make a decision on whether their QC tasks or QC reviews should be passed or failed. So this is the Validate interface. We have the main player that's built on our Accurate player. We have the ability to load in custom safe areas or graphic overlays and things like that. But more importantly, we get access to all of this metadata. So I've got the static metadata, the technical metadata. I've got different settings. So maybe I have different audio tracks, different subtitles. But then I also have the marker table. So here I have hundreds, if not thousands, of different markers that have been detected through various types of automated workflows in Rally. So that might be a Bayton auto QC report, for example. So if we have a look here in the timeline, you can see we've got some tones, some silence detected, black frames, duplicate frames, all sorts of technical issues that somebody in content operations would need to be able to review and identify whether these are false positives or whether they're a problem that need to be fixed or potentially rejected. Further down, we can now see in the timeline, we've got various AI markers. So Amazon Recognition, Google Video Intelligence, and right down here at the bottom, we've got our Vionlabs ad break. So what Arash was talking about, using the multimodal AI to really look at the content and understand where are the significant scene changes, which are the important scene changes, and more importantly, being able to rank them in terms of quality. And that's really what makes Vionlabs such a powerful solution. So how this works in an ad break workflow is we've had our detection done. I'm going to clean up the timeline because it's a little bit too cluttered. So I'm going to turn off my Bayton markers. some of my other Amazon markers that I don't need, like the celebrities. I'm not interested in some of the moderation. I am going to look at some of these segments here. I'm going to use those to help guide my workflow. But basically, I'm just going to clean up my timeline a little bit and make sure that it's not too cluttered. So that's one thing we can do easily. Obviously, if I need to work with lots of audio, I can do that too. And in my marker tab here now, I've got a nicely condensed table of just the content segments, which have been identified, and just the markers from Vionlabs. So that's the first, is making sure this is all nicely set up and optimized. And we actually have a dedicated ad break workspace here in Validate. So what I'm going to do now is use these segments and identify the first frame at the beginning of my program. So you're probably all familiar with this Netflix Meridian file, and it's showing us the timing for my very first frame. So play that, it begins. So I can go in here, and in my program tab, I'm going to press P on my keyboard, which is my keyboard shortcut for my beginning marker. So this is really saying, okay, I'm ignoring the credits. Again, these are things that Vionlabs can detect. I'm not interested in the opening credits or the titles. And I'm also interested in the last frame before we hit the end credits, because that's really where our content is. That's the important part where we need to determine where the breaks are going to be. So there's my opening marker. So far, so good. But I'm also needing to look at my last frame here. So there's my final segment. I click to the last piece of time code. And again, I can see that this is going to be going into my credits any second now. So I'm going to go jump back to that location, find my last frame, and place my end frame marker with the Shift P keyboard shortcut. So again, trying to make this as efficient as possible. And everyone who loves keyboard shortcuts will know that Validate has got plenty of those to navigate around. And now we've got our end break marker that will appear. And now I'm going to be able to determine ultimately where my where the actual duration of the program. So now I've placed my end break marker, and at the bottom of the screen here, you can see that it's measured the duration of the program frame accurately to a little over 10 minutes. So this is a short film. We're obviously not going to have too many ad breaks. But now if I look at my different Vionlabs markers, you can see that I've got the different rankings here. So I've got ranking 1, which would be essentially the best marker location. And it's determined this based on scene changes, black frames, audio silence, changes in sentiment between scenes, really getting down and saying, and this is one of the very best places for an ad break. And it also happens to be more or less in the middle of the program after the first 2 major scenes of this. So really, this is the place for my primary ad break marker. So if I press B on my keyboard, I can now press my validation marker, essentially, which is our orange diamond marker that says, right, I want to use this as my best ad break location. But perhaps also, especially when you're dealing with long form content, you may be dealing with many more markers, both primary events, but also you might want to identify secondary events for other downstream automations where you might be deciding, okay, different partners might need to have different numbers of markers for their ad breaks. In the US, you have different ad breaks versus in Europe, for example, in terms of frequency. So I'm going to go back and maybe try and find another tier 1 marker here, which is ranked as 1. And again, I want to validate that that's the correct marker. So really, Validate is all about being the human in the loop for the content operations teams to be able to efficiently review the AI markers, make decisions about them, and as quickly and as intuitively as possible, being able to apply the validation markers, make decisions, and ultimately, when they're happy with that, they can then change the status of this to passed. So this is now ready for send to VOD, perhaps, or some sort of notes, and that will then take over the task, complete it, and back in Rally, automation will take over once again and be able to deliver those ad break markers as Scutty markers, send them to a downstream ad insertion server. So really, that's the overview of Validate with particular focus on ad break workflows. It's about taking AI, making good decisions, and speeding up the overall process, reducing the amount of time and manual time and effort that goes into determining where the key scene changes are. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, there's not much else to show because, like I said at the beginning, automation is taking over from this point again, and we'll package this up, insert the markers, like Neil said, either as a SCSI marker or as a sidecar file or anything like this, because the ready automation will receive the information back from the validate session with all the markers, all the exact timing frame accurately, and then the supply chain can decide whatever it needs to do in the next step or two or three or four. So your bot delivery to all the endpoints can happen, and that can happen again in parallel for all the assets much, much more efficiently than if you've done this manually from the start.
And if you don't mind, let me just add the importance around shortcuts actually in a workflow like this. I mean, myself, I have been labeling quite a lot of ad breaks, of course, to train the actual model. And having shortcuts in place, like you have in Accurate Validate, is extremely important for you to be able to do it quickly. I have done it in a UI where you don't have shortcuts on your keyboard, and that makes the whole workflow so much more tedious. So just having some of these details layered on top of the actual AI models really makes the efficiency in the actual workflow.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agreed with our long-standing relationship with lots of our customers. When it comes to these kind of operations, almost every click counts, right? You don't think that every click counts, but if you do these operations many times a day, then every click counts. I was talking in the beginning about how already work order packages all the information needed into that single interface. I find the work I need to, click the Accurate Validate button, and off I'm in the session. If you need to look that up and find that in 3 different tools, that might take you 5 or 6 minutes. That doesn't sound like much, but you do that 10 times, that's 60 minutes, that's an hour. You do that across 10 people in a day, that's 10 hours every day. People are just clicking around trying to find the content and get ready for the work instead of doing the actual work. And think about how many ad break you can define and send through the system in those 10 hours. So at some point, it sounds unnecessary, but you get down to the efficiencies where every other click really counts. So being able to hit a button instead of finding where the ad marker and then click this and click that really does make a difference if you really down to the efficiency gains that some of our joint customers are at already.
Yeah. I fully agree.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. You've done a great job of sort of encapsulating sort of the pre-solution workflow and the cost in terms of clicks versus the post-solution workflow, right? In terms of how their jobs change, how the workflow changes, and the efficiency gains that we can get out of this. Arash, I do have a question for you around kind of the accuracy of these candidates that your tool generates. How do they sort of compare versus what an experienced editor might choose?
I mean, I would say if you're sitting down and doing it manually and you're full energy as a human being, I mean, without the human fatigue being kind of counted into it, you probably can do a pretty good job. But you have to also think about the time efficiency. The models are there to recommend things, and you always have to keep in mind that AI models will hallucinate every now and then. You can, and I'm going to be very transparent with everybody here. If you look at a scene where the camera is tilting past a wall and going into darkness and then going into another room, that can definitely be perceived from the model as a place where it's a black frame coming in, right? And it's maybe the music is low, nobody's speaking. So you have to keep that in mind. And that's why it's so important to have the whole workflow set in place so somebody can validate that quickly. The models are, of course, getting better and better year by year, and they're getting to a level where we have some clients that done to a certain level automation, but QCing have always been a key part of this to be able to have a good output with a high quality. But I always tend to say to anybody working with any AI models out there, no matter if it's ChatGPT, Anthropic, or whatever you're using, you should always double check the data you get out to a certain level, and you should always make sure that you have a human in the loop in part of the process.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great place to close this webinar. I want to give you a huge thank you to Arash, Chris, and Neil for your time and for building this solution and showing it off. It really was impressive. And for those of you out there, if you're running ad-supported content, thinking about your own ad break workflow, whether it's a library backfill, a new fast channel, or just getting more out of your ad-supported tier, we'd love to talk to you. This solution is running in production today, and we can show you how it maps to your specific pipeline and your specific workflows. The contact details for each of the 3 companies here are on screen. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you.